Hello there, Richard from Digital Foundry here. We put a lot of time into the Star Wars Battlefront PC beta, and it's given us a really good idea of how the game works on a technological basis, how settings should be tweaked for the optimal experience, and what kind of hardware you'll need. Here we're tweaking the setup to provide a console-like experience for what we call entry-level enthusiast GPUs like the GTX 750 Ti and AMD's R7 360. Resolution scale drops to 85% to bring us close to PS4 standard 900p, while settings are mostly on high presets with a couple of changes. We select medium shadows, ultra textures, and we select medium for ambient occlusion. Meanwhile, the general effects preset is set to low. It's not an entire lock to console, but it's pretty damn close. Running through the game's scripted sequences in both stock and overclock forms, you can see that the AMD hardware takes point on performance, and that at these settings we are quite a way above 60 FPS. Well, you are, but only in these scripted sequences. Basically, we need some headroom here, as during gameplay effects work is much more impactful to the GPU, and with both graphics cards at stock settings, the GTX 750 Ti can actually drop below 50 FPS. Now, with a game designed with locked 60 FPS gameplay in mind, that's a bit of a problem. So overclocking helps, of course. The R7 360 keeps ahead of the GTX 750 Ti significantly, while the Nvidia card can still drop below 60 FPS here. We'd recommend using adaptive VSync in the Nvidia control panel for the best overall experience there. So if you're on a budget, the R7 360 may seem like the obvious choice, except we're benchmarking the GPU in isolation here, using a high-power Core i7 processor to take CPU load out of the equation. This isn't going to happen on a typical budget rig, so let's retest both cards using a Core i3 4130. That's a dual-core processor. Keeping our overclock in place, what's clear is that pairing a budget CPU with AMD's R7 360 produces some alarming results. Look at those enormous latency spikes when the i3 is paired with the 360. It's really not pretty. Meanwhile, the GTX 750 Ti may be slower, but paired with the i3 it retains much more of its overall performance. Indeed, we've paired the i3 with a Titan X maxed at 1080p, and with VSync engaged we get a perfect locked 60 FPS from start to finish. So the question is, does this enormous loss of performance on AMD extend to gameplay outside of these scripted sequences? Well, in survival mode, there aren't really any problems at all, on the Tatooine map in the beta that we had to test at least. Comparing Hoth gameplay, which features 40 online players, we do see some alarming stutter in places. So, with the GTX 750 Ti and the R7 360, we do need to make some compromises on visual quality, and Nvidia's base performance isn't really up to scratch, and the AMD driver's CPU load really rules out the R7 360. So what happens when we move up a notch? Here are our settings for the GTX 950 and the R7 370. To get the best overall experience, we still recommend dropping resolution scale, in this case down to 90%. Effects quality, well, we can rise that to medium, and ambient occlusion to high. So let's see how those benchmarks look. Well, overall frame rates are higher, meaning less chance of dropping below 60 FPS during intense gameplay. And here, Nvidia actually has a small lead, even on stock settings, and that extends as we move into our Tatooine survival test. So it's a triple win for Nvidia here, as not only is performance faster, the GTX 950 has a higher overclocking threshold, plus you can use it with an i3 processor, something we just can't recommend for any AMD card. So anyway, that's our initial outlook on Battlefront PC performance running on budget hardware. If you're thinking about upgrading to get the most out of the game but your budget is limited, hopefully this hardware testing and our setting suggestions will be of help once the game comes out. We'll be looking at higher end cards shortly, but in the meantime, subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.
Not my best landing.
Hey, let's go!
Not my best landing.
Hey, let's go!
Not my best landing.
Hey, let's go!